For more than a century, no freight train in America was complete without one. A small red car at the tail end of every consist, swaying through mountain passes and desert straightaways, manned by crews whose lives depended on what they could see from its cupola window. The caboose was not merely a tradition. It was a safety system, a rolling workplace, and the last line of defense between a runaway train and catastrophe. Then, in the span of a single decade, it vanished from the American railroad almost entirely. No gradual phase-out, no public debate, no farewell tour. Railroads did not retire the caboose. They banned it. If this car protected lives for over 100 years, how did it disappear so completely, and so fast? The answer does not lie in engineering. It lies in a decision made not on the tracks, but in a boardroom. The caboose entered American railroading in the 1860s as a practical solution to an operational problem no railroad could ignore. Freight trains were growing longer, heavier, and faster. Hot boxes, overheated axle bearings that could ignite a wooden car and burn an entire consist to the rail, were among the most dangerous failures of the era. The caboose was the answer. Positioned at the tail of the train, staffed by a conductor and one or two brakemen, it provided eyes where the locomotive had none. The cupola, a raised observation deck mounted on the roof, gave crew members a sight line over the entire length of the train. From that position, a brakeman could spot a smoking axle or a broken coupling 3/4 of a mile ahead and act before the engineer knew anything was wrong. Official accident reports filed with the Interstate Commerce Commission document case after case in which caboose crews identified brake failures and broken equipment in time to prevent derailments. A 1909 ICC study attributed the prevention of an estimated 340 serious incidents over 5 years directly to rear-end crew observation. These were not near misses. They were disasters that did not happen because a man in a cupola was watching. By mid-century, the caboose had become a complete mobile workplace. Internal ICC regulations required railroads to equip each one with sleeping bunks, a stove, a desk, first aid supplies, and flagging equipment. The conductor managed the train's paperwork from the caboose, tracking car numbers, waybills, and switching instructions for every stop on the run. For the men who lived in them, these cars were a second home, and a dangerous one. Riding the tail end of a heavy freight through mountain grades meant absorbing every slack action, the violent compression and extension of couplings that could hurl an unsecured man across the car. Accident logs from the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, preserved at the Newberry Library in Chicago, record hundreds of injuries sustained by caboose crews during normal operations, alongside the more catastrophic rear-end collisions that occasionally obliterated the car entirely. The caboose was essential. It was also expensive, and by the 1970s, the railroads were no longer willing to absorb that cost. The economic case against the caboose had been building since the early 1960s, when the first end-of-train telemetry devices began appearing in technical journals. These units, small electronic sensors attached to the rear coupler of the last freight car, transmitted brake pipe pressure readings to a display in the locomotive cab. The concept was straightforward. If a brakeman in a cupola was watching for brake failures, and a sensor could detect the same failures automatically, the sensor did not need a salary, a pension, or a union contract. A caboose cost approximately $25,000 to build in 1970 dollars, required constant maintenance, and had to be repositioned after every run. The crew required to staff it represented annual salary and benefit obligations that, across thousands of daily freight movements, amounted to hundreds of millions of dollars per year for a major Class Y railroad. The Association of American Railroads commissioned internal studies in the early 1970s, arguing that electronic monitoring could replicate the core safety function of the caboose at a fraction of the cost. The device that would replace it had a bureaucratic name, the End of Train Device, or EOT, and it weighed less than 15 pounds. The battle that followed was fought not on the tracks, but in the hearing rooms of the Federal Railroad Administration. UTU representatives appearing before the FRA in 1982 submitted documentation of 1,400 incidents over 10 years in which caboose crews had performed functions no electronic device could replicate: flagging stopped trains, providing first aid, assisting in derailment response, communicating with wayside personnel in areas without radio coverage. The FRA record from those hearings, archived under docket FRA 1981-0025 at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, runs to over 3,000 pages. The agency's final ruling did not mandate the elimination of cabooses. It left the decision to collective bargaining. The railroads did not wait. Between 1981 and 1988, every major Class I carrier negotiated the caboose out of existence. The Burlington Northern by 1983, the Southern Pacific by 1984, the Union Pacific by 1985. By 1990, the caboose had effectively ceased to exist as a functional element of American freight railroading. What replaced it weighed 15 pounds and blinked a red light. The EOT transmitted brake pipe pressure from the rear of the train and later added motion sensors and two-way communication for emergency brake applications. These were genuine capabilities. They were also far narrower than what a trained crew could provide. The EOT could not see. It could not identify a shifted load about to topple on a curve. It could not spot a dragging brake shoe throwing sparks into dry grass. It could not flag a stopped train, provide first aid, or make a judgment call in conditions no sensor had been programmed to anticipate. Every function that required human presence vanished with the caboose. FRA accident data from the following decade showed no statistically significant increase in the incident categories caboose crews had specifically prevented. Railroads cited this as vindication. Safety researchers noted that the same period saw reduced train speeds and improved wayside bearing detectors, factors that may have compensated for the loss of rear-end observation independent of the EOT. The data did not settle the argument. It simply ended it. The caboose was already gone. Today, a handful of preserved cabooses sit in railroad museums and city parks, their red paint faded, their cupola windows dark. The rest, an estimated 20,000 cars, were scrapped or abandoned, their cupolas slowly collapsing on forgotten sidings. The caboose lasted 120 years on the American railroad. It was eliminated in less than 10, not because it failed, not because technology made it truly obsolete in every function it performed, but because the cost of keeping men employed to do a job that a 15-pound device could partially replicate was a cost the industry decided it no longer had to bear.